Alright, so I'm working on a 2005 GMC Sierra, and this is a kind of a special model, the Vindicator model. And what we're going to be doing is replacing the front inner and outer tie rods on this. There's gotten to be a lot of slack in the steering, and thinking that it's in the tie rods, but I want to rule out these first before moving on to assuming that it's the rack and pinion. But you could possibly have a problem with your rack and pinion depending on how it's acting, but this has just got some slack, so hopefully this is going to fix things up. First thing, we're going to get it jacked up. I'll show you kind of where I've got my jack position on this flat part right under here, and we're going to also get wheel chock and get us a couple of jack stands underneath the front up here on this beam for safety. So I'm just going to go ahead and work on getting the tire off. Let me show you some of the things we're going to be using here. You're going to need to get you one of these inner tie rod tools. Just put a deposit, and you can get this from AutoZone. It's like I said, it's got various sizes in here that's going to fit this inner tie rod, and I can show you how that works here shortly. And as far as what we're going to be replacing today, we've got our outer tie rod here, and it may not look exactly the same as the factory, but you can do a comparison and make sure that it's going to work. And I've matched them up, and it's fine. Checked it for the size and the length and everything, the same as the inner. This is the inner tie rod, and I've done a comparison of it as well. Now also, if you're replacing on your truck, you'll probably want to get you a new boot. These aren't very much, come with a kit, and it was worth it to go ahead and get this, because the ones on there cracked, and it's just going to be future problems using old boots. So it's a good idea to go ahead and get you a new set of boots to go on this rack and pinion. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to get the tire off here. Okay, so we got our wheel off. Now we can get in here to this tie rod, and you can wiggle this, and you can start to tell how much wear it has. This truck, I believe, has got around 130,000 on it. And these are pretty severely worn, and the inner one, that noise you hear right there, that's your inner tie rod ball. It's got a lot of slack. And in the case of this truck, the inner is actually worse than the outer tie rod. So, and I can show you more about it when we get it out of here. The first thing I think we're going to do, we'll go ahead and get our nut loose. This is an 18. And then before we knock this out, we're going to go ahead and break this nut right here loose. And this is for our outer tie rod, but we'll go ahead and just take a 7/8, I believe, and we'll break that loose while we've got it still into its socket there to make it a little easier, so we're not having to hold on to it. And another thing, when we before we just go to taking all this loose, we're going to make a mark on here as to where exactly this nut is located, and we'll do a comparison on the new tie rod and make some marks, and we'll try to get it as close as we can. It's going to have to be aligned, but we're going to try to get it as close as we can until we get it aligned. So go ahead and get us a mark on here of some sort, and we'll determine how many threads we have, and we'll go ahead and get this loose here. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get this 18 loose first, and I'm just going to be using a wrench. You may have to get a cheater bar or something to break it loose with if it's really stuck. Okay, so I've just took and got the nut off of this right here, and then I've taken a 7/8 and I've took and got this here loose, and I just took my rubber mallet when I was holding this in my hand and just kind of knocked that down and got it loose. That's all we need for that, and we're just going to kind of leave that nut there. Now we're going to go ahead and take just a regular hammer and start hitting this here. You can also hit it on the side. Sometimes the pressure will knock this loose. This has a big area right here for like holding on to it with the wrench or hitting it. It's not even near the thread, so I'm not reusing it anyway, so I'm not even worried about it. So I'm just going to be hitting it right here. I'll just give it a few good whacks and it should just pop up and out of here. Okay, and there we go, and it's like I said, it only took about 3 or 4 good whacks and it just popped right out of there, no problem, just with a small hammer. So at this point, what we're going to do is going to get us a 13 millimeter on. You can't really see it for this dirt that's caked up on here, but we just take a wrench and we get back up here onto this part that has a spot for the wrench. We're going to hold that, and we're going to take a what I like to use, this big crescent wrench, and get a hold of it like this. So we're going to loosen it with the crescent while we're holding this up here. I'm sorry, this part up here is where we actually got to put the 13 on. So sometimes I've took and, like, if I have trouble holding it, I'll like wedge the wrench against something up here while I work on breaking this loose. Sometimes it can be kind of stubborn. It just depends on how stuck it is. Okay, I just want to show you on this one. I'm just taking this loose with my hand. It's not the least bit stuck at all, so I'm not even having to use the crescent wrench. And all I did was break this nut here loose. Now notice that nut is actually in the position. I did mark it a little bit back there by scratching those threads, but I'm going to leave that nut there for now, so I can get a better count of these threads here, so I know how to put the other one back the same. So I'm going to go ahead, like I said, and I'm just going to count these threads from here to here so I know that I can get the other one back the same as this here. And then we'll work on getting this boot loose next. And you can see there's a clamp. We'll just use some pliers to get that clamp there loose, and there's going to also be a clamp, a metal clamp in the back or something, and we'll have to break that loose as well. Okay, after counting them threads, I'm going to just take this big nut here completely off, because I'm going to be sliding this boot off here. Now I'm just getting up here with some pliers, get that clamp, and we'll just take that completely off. Now, like I said, we're going to have a strap or something in the back here that I'll need to get to, so I'm going to have to get up under there and get a look at that. Okay, all I've done is got in under this clamp on this boot here, and you can see where I've just pried that one side up, just kind of dug under it with it on there and just kind of pried it up. And then I was able just to reach back there and pop it completely off. Like I said, the front one, I'd already took that clamp loose, so I just give it a good yank, and this whole thing is just pulling off of here. And with this off, we can get back there and be able to get to our get to this part of our tie rod. And you can also notice this little piece right here. It's like a little tube that runs across through there, so when you're turning it, I guess it can get air and stuff without getting dust inside, and it just connects one tube to the other side. It's just a piece of pipe that runs across through there from that, and you have to line that back up when you put it back on there. So I'll have to do that, and you can see when I went to pulling on it, it's yanked this whole thing loose, so I'll have to reconnect that to the other side as well. It's really not a big deal. So we'll just go ahead and get this off of here now. Okay, now this thing has this pink collar that goes over this inner tie rod, and it's in the way, so it has to be pushed back. I just knocked it back with a screwdriver out of the way. You can see how it just slides up and over it there. So I just knocked it back out of the way, and I'll replace it on the new one since it's there. Might as well use it. And now we're going to go ahead and get a hold of this. We're going to find the right size to get a hold of this here. Okay, so 1 3/8 fits on there quite nicely. Now the replacement ones will be a different size usually, unless you get the exact same. And we're getting ready. We just slide this on those notches. Now it's also got this piece right here, this piece of this lever that you slide once you get it on there, and that locks it, keeps that collar from moving, you know, backwards or wherever. Locks it into place so it's not moving around on you. So once you get it on there, be sure to lock your little collar there. So now we're going to go ahead and just slide this up onto here, and it sets right on there. It's nice and snug, and like I said, we get up there and we lock it into place by pushing that collar. And then we're going to get a wrench on here. Will be our next step. Okay, so you'll notice it's locked on there because I flipped that lever. And now we're going to use a breaker bar extension to get us out here where we need to be. And we're just going to get this set up here. And you'll notice that also got a big cheater bar here as well. And I'm going to utilize that because sometimes these things, it takes a tremendous amount of force to get them to break loose at first, and they put a lot of high strength Loctite on there as well, so it'll take a lot of force. Okay, and with a good amount of force we got it broke loose, and you just finish turning this by hand and get it completely the rest of the way off of there. And there we go, and that's what you're left with. And I'll show you this collar here again. You flip that back and it'll release that, and it appears to be stuck here for whatever reason. There it goes. But like I said, that just flips. So you got that on the inner tie rod. You can see how it fits around it there and just locks onto it. And you want to get the tightest one possible because it'll slip otherwise. Like I said, once you get it on there, you just flip that and lock it into place so it holds it there. And I actually was able to get it with just my breaker bar without using the cheater bar on top of that. This one wasn't too bad, but I've had them where they've been really stuck, and when they break loose you go flying if you ain't careful. So be careful. And you can see that red high strength Loctite that's coming off there. You can see a piece of that. So it's really on there. So this is the old one, and it's just, like I said, that right there, it's not supposed to be moving at all. It's supposed to be really tight, and it's It's just flopping in the wind. And it's also got slack, you know, when you pull on it as well, so it's just not doing any good. So we're going to go ahead and get a new one on. So we'll do a comparison, and we'll get the nut on there to where it needs. Well, first thing we'll have to get the boot on, but we'll make sure we get a mark and we know where we're going to put that nut, so we get it back in as close as possible to being in the same place. Like I said, that is just completely worn out, and like I said, the inner is worse than the outer. The outer, I mean, yeah, this is definitely worn. It's grinding, it's loose as it can be. It's just not good, not doing much good. So we'll go ahead and get some Loctite, get our other tie rod, inner tie rod, and we'll work on getting it into place here. And this is why it's a good idea to check your boots. You see that completely split there, busted, so all that dust and dirt and mud just getting right in there and wearing the tie rod out. You know, if you put that back on there with your new one, it won't be no time, it's going to be in the same shape. So definitely go ahead, get you some new ones. And tell us, they almost start getting so brittle, it's just tough plastic at this point. These new ones are actually soft and got a little flex to them. And so here's our inner tie rod. Yeah, let's work on getting it out here. And you can't hardly move this joint at all when it's new. I mean, it's just dang near impossible to move. It's just really tight, and that's the way that it should be. It's supposed to move, but it's not supposed to move that much. So we'll go ahead and take off that new nut, because we're going to have to slip this new boot over there after we get it tightened into place. Now you'll notice that this tie rod, it also comes with a little packet of grease, and we'll take that and put it, once we get it into place, we'll put it around our joint here. Just some extra grease. We're also going to put some Loctite on this before we get it into place. And we need to find out what size that's going to be as well. But like I said, done a comparison, and these, the old one, it's the exact same length. The threads may be a little bit more, but the overall length, which is what counts, is exactly the same. So it's exactly the same. We're just going to get the nut back into the spot by counting the threads and measuring, and just try to get it as close as we can to where the old placement was there. Okay, so after repositioning the inner tie rod tool and locking it, I've just got my torque wrench on here, and just went ahead and tightened this to 85 foot-pounds. Like I said, I did put Loctite on that as well before I tightened it. We went 85 foot-pounds on that, so that is tight. Now we are ready for the next step. We'll go ahead and get this the new boot put on, and we'll also reconnect that tube I was showing you. Okay, so here's another look at this new boot. Like I said, there's that spot that the tube goes in. It just slides on that, and that'll be up on the top. And it also comes with some little zip ties. Got a big one for the back we'll put on once we get it snugged into place, and then we got this one for the front. Okay, as far as that tube goes that goes on top to those two little points on the boot, I had to kind of crawl underneath and wiggle that and kind of connect both sides at once. It was kind of tricky, and I've just took and put my zip ties on here very easy, and just kind of trimmed the ends of them once I got that on there. So we've got that boot secured. and it's nice and snug. So now we'll go ahead and work on getting our nut into position. Like I said, I know I counted the threads, and I can also tell by measuring and looking at the other one about where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to go ahead and get the nut placed on there with a little bit of Loctite, and we'll work on getting our tie rod on here, our outer tie rod. Okay, and if you're unsure, you could also take like a pair of calipers, or you could also measure your threads about where they were before and get, you know, a fairly accurate measurement if you're not able to count them, because like these threads are different from the other one, and they don't have as many threads coming to the end. It's more rounded, so sometimes you might do better by getting a hook on the thread. You knew where the nut was at and getting a measurement and putting it exactly, you know, within a 1/16 or a 32nd. So just whatever, you know, you need to do to get it as close as you can. Another thing I like to do once I got this nut in position, when I'm putting the outer tie rod to keep this from moving around, I just put me some tape around it tied against, so I know that this is not going to be moving back any while I get this here screwed on. I'm going to put a little bit of Loctite on here, and we'll just go ahead and start threading that, and we'll be jamming that nut against this as well. But very easy. Once you get the location of the net, this will just screw on by hand, no problem. And we're not just going to crank down, we're just going to screw it up till it's right flush with the nut, and we're just going to stop no matter what position it's in, because this thing will rotate. We're just going to stop right once it touches. So right there, just going to stop right there. I don't care what location this is in, we're just going to stop right there and go ahead and jam this tight back against this. I don't have a special tool for torquing it, so what I like to do is just get something to hold this. And I'll usually use this here, and I'll just wedge it back over against this or something, get it where it's going to hit when I'm tightening it, and then I'll get my 7/8 on here and get it really snug, and then I'll even take and use my cheetah pipe on that 7/8 and give it just a final snug, because I want that to be really good and tight, because I don't really have a way of getting a torque wrench on it, so I'm just going to make sure that it's really tight. And so we're just going to go ahead and do that now. Like I said, I'm just going to hold it with this here and maybe wedge this against something, or hold it with one hand and snug it down and jam that nut back against this tie rod here. Okay, so I just want to show you how I was tightening this. I've got this crescent locked onto here. It's just sitting down on this spindle knuckle here, kind of holding it into place. And I'm keeping downward force with this hand just to prevent this from moving. And then I've just got a cheater bar. I'd already snugged it up, but I put the cheater bar on there, fits on my wrench, and then I've got it. And just while I was holding this with this hand, got as much force on this as I could. So I'm really confident that it's tight now. So with that done, that's how I do it. It's just kind of wedged there, and it just enables me to get it really good and tight without having to worry about holding that wrench. Now I can just turn this, and we'll pull our knuckle back around here and get that into place. There's nothing to it, and you can take that tape off if you want. Now we're just going to go ahead and get our castle nut and our pin and we'll get this into place. Like I said, these are a little bit different, but they're the same, and they work exactly the same. It's just this one's a little longer, the factory, and it's got this little piece on it here. Other than that, it's no different. So we'll go ahead and get that in there and get that castle nut on that. Okay, so we're just tightening this up, this 18mm right now, and we got it snugged down, and now we're just going to go 55 foot-pounds on this. Okay, now you got a slot for your little cotter pin to go, so you may have to tighten your nut a little more if it doesn't line up just right for you, and then just bend those sides over. Okay, with that outer tie rod torqued down and the cotter pin in, we're ready to go ahead and just get our wheel back on at this point. And we'll just be tightening these lugs to 100 foot-pounds, and we'll go ahead and get it tested out and take it down the road and see how it feels. Okay, so we've took it down the road, and I'm not getting anything crazy. It feels pretty good. I can tell that it's going to have an alignment, which you knew that already, but doesn't feel crazy or anything, and it's safe, and I'm getting really good response when I'm turning the steering wheel, which it wasn't getting before. Seems like, you know, it's as soon as you turn the wheels are turning, unlike before it had that extra slack in there. So it definitely made a big difference on that. So only time will tell. We'll see how it does, but I think that the tie rods were really all this thing was needing. So like I said, hopefully this has been helpful, and if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and invite you to subscribe, and thank you for watching.